Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. We are just ready to get started learning about ASTP and Behind Happy Faces for the EME trainers. Hillary Stahl is our education coordinator, and she is going to get us started and go over the things that we need to know as EME trainers about these two programs.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Like Karen said, my name is Hillary Stahl, and for those of you that I don't know, I work in our education department, and one of my main roles is to oversee this harm reduction series. As Karen and Marla and I were talking about it, we thought it would be really beneficial for EME trainers who are out and working with our chapters to learn more about what these programs entail and what the big picture for this harm reduction series is. So you'll see today, I'm going to go over big, like 50,000 foot view of what this program looks like and how we're implementing it and when chapters receive programs and that type of a thing. And then I'm going to dive down into two specific programs so that those are available as well. I know Karen is recording this, so we will have these available so that you can learn a little bit more about the programs later. If for some reason you have to step away for a couple minutes, like this will be available to you. And please feel free to ask any questions as we're going. I am presuming Karen will just feed them to me as we feel that they're relevant. If not, we can also wait for all the questions until the end because I'm sure that there will be some things that I will address later that I haven't talked about quite in the beginning. And if for some reason you lose me, because I frequently, for some reason, lose audio when I'm on a webinar, just let us know and I will log out and then log back on. That seems to work pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So overall, this harm reduction series is truly a rotational series. This was something that when I came on staff, I felt like this was programming that we were lacking. We have such heavy hitting topics that are hitting our college students these days that they are just not quite prepared for. And while we didn't have a ton of alcohol programming, we definitely didn't have any mental health programming. We didn't have any sexual assault programming. We didn't have any diversity inclusion program. So as we started dreaming up what would this series look like, those were the 4 programs that we decided we wanted to launch to our members. And so as you can see them on the screen, we have 4 of them. It will fall in this order. The rotational series falls in this order. So if a chapter had ASTP this year, they will move to Behind Happy Faces next year. If somebody has Behind Happy Faces this year, they'll move to the sexual assault program next year, and then so on, so forth, as you can see through there. They are facilitator-led programs, so we have trained individuals to go in and lead these programs. These are not chapter-led, so they're very similar to EME trainers like you, but instead of them developing the curriculum like you all have to, we have the curriculum already developed for them, and they go through an extensive training in order to be able to deliver the program, and they go into the chapters and they deliver the actual program. Couple key pieces to this rotational series. Our thought process on this was that we truly wanted it to be through the risk reduction, harm prevention lens. And when in doing that, we decided that we wanted our members to feel as though they were in a safe environment in order to have any conversation that they possibly could. And we also recognize that we may hear some things in these chapter rooms as we're doing this training that leads us to potentially raise an eyebrow, and that's okay. With this program, with these programs, our total hope is to get us to a point where they are reframing their thought process so that it is not risk management, it's risk prevention. So how can I prevent myself from being in a risky situation moving forward? And so in all of these situations, in all of these programs, that's how we frame the conversation. The actual rotation logistics. So what happens, like I said, one follows the next. We selected 27 pilot chapters to receive ASTP last academic year. We trained a handful of people. They went out across the country, and these 27 chapters were chosen at random. That's the beauty of the harm reduction piece. We don't give it 2 chapters in an intervention type lens. So if something has happened and they, for some reason, have had an alcohol issue, this is not going to be a program that we are going to see within their warning of probation or within their terms of probation. This is not going to be something that we will give to them in that light, because what we want to do is we want to keep the integrity of actually making it harm reduction and not intervention or that management piece. So these 27 chapters were completely chosen at random. They were drawn out of hat by Suzanne Dalton and her chapter team at that point in time when we still had the RDs. And what we did after that to create the rest of the cycle for the next 3 years, we said 27 chapters will receive it in the pilot year, 50 chapters in year 2, 50 chapters in year 3, and then the remainder of the chapters in year 4. And then we would start it over if we felt that the rotational series was still relevant. At the end of 4 years, we may not want to still offer ASTP. So every chapter will receive at least a program once a year in this series order, and the series follows one another. So the 27 chapters that were our pilot chapters for ASTP are our pilot chapters for Behind Happy Faces. They will be the pilot chapters for sexual assault, and they will be the pilot chapters for diversity and inclusion. So they're kind of a pilot to the entire program. Additionally, those that fall in year 2 will also follow in year 2 as we implement the rest of the programs out. So the beauty about this is we know what the schedule looks like until 2021, which is great. And that's available to all of you in the cloud. So if you go to the cloud and then education and training, you'll see 2 different folders. There's an ASTP and a Behind Happy Faces folder. Both of them have the visit schedule. There are tabs across the bottom, so you can see which chapters are getting these programs in which academic years. So like I said, 27 received ASTP last year. We have 50 receiving it this year. So 77 chapters will have received it, more than half of them by the end of this year. And next year, we have 27 Behind Happy Faces that are happening currently. We'll have 50 Behind Happy Faces happening next year, 50 ASTP happening next year, and then another 27 sexual assault. So we're getting to the point that essentially every one of our chapters will receive one of these programs every year. That is essentially how the rotation logistics will work. We notify a chapter that they're getting a visit next academic year this April. I'm hopeful to have assigned their facilitators. We do it a little bit differently than how we do with EME trainers. Instead of Karen sending you an email and saying, hey, who's available to go to Beta Nu on March 2nd? What I do is I say, Karen and Beta Nu, you are matched, and you find the date and provide me the date and time that you plan on doing this workshop. We do ask that they do the workshops after their primary recruitment period, but in some situations that's not possible. So we'll work with them on that. Trained facilitators. So a little bit more about our facilitators. Each one of our facilitators has gone through an extensive training in order to be certified to deliver the program. So for those of you that are on this webinar that may be interested in potentially facilitating these programs in the future, I'm happy to talk to you about next time we will be training for these programs, but you do have to go through ASTP is a full about 15-hour day training, and then we also have a second component to that the next day where we really walk through the curriculum because it is a lot of information to digest. Behind Happy Faces is about a 12-hour program that they need to have training on, and then sexual assault and diversity inclusion will mirror very similar to what Behind Happy Faces did as well. ASTP, I can't train anybody in ASTP because I'm not licensed to. So I do have to bring in a certified ASTP licensed trainer to come in. So we will only certify ASTP people probably every other year moving forward. Whereas Behind Happy Faces, sexual assault and diversity inclusion, I'll be able to train and certify people moving forward. So it is not necessarily an easy thing to become a trainer. Just like you all had to go through a trainer weekend, they have to go through a trainer weekend, but there is a trainer weekend specific to each one of these programs. Hopefully, as we build out the programs and as we build out our facilitator pool, we'll begin to be able to offer multiple programs in the same weekend, but at this point, we're not quite there yet. The last component to this rotational series that is new and unique to Kappa, and some of you may know this and some of you may not, but we offer the opportunity for friends of Kappa Kappa Gamma to facilitate this program. And so we have partnered with many different campus partners, headquarters staff members, individuals that are content experts in the field of study that are interested in facilitating and who also have a very impressive facilitator resume. And so they came through the training, but we have about 50% Kappas, 50% non-Kappas that participate. I call them Friends of Kappa, or some of our people call them Friends of the Fleur, which I love. And so we have them that they participate in this programming and facilitate for us as well. Reason being, we were seeing that our facilitator pool was definitely stretched thin. We knew we were going to need to bump this pool to be about 75 to 80, anywhere between 75 and 100 people deep in order to get 140 visits happening each year in addition to the visits that all of you do. And we also really wanted to make sure that we were putting the absolute best people in front of our members when it comes to these topics. And so I love the mix. We love the dynamic, and it definitely has provided an opportunity for our members to gain something through potentially a different lens, especially if it's not just a Kappa standing up in front of us. One of the things that I know our women have loved have been having men as facilitators. So interesting dynamic, but it is definitely something that I have seen as we have developed and continued to produce this programming for them that they have really enjoyed. So that is something that we plan on continuing, because at the end of the day, our volunteers are limited, and we can't stretch you so thin. So we wanted to make sure that programs like this could still happen. So,
Hillary, one question on the rotation. How are new chapters work into the rotation, the schedule for visits?
Yeah, great question. So depends. Like Beta New this year, because we knew that they were happening, I worked them into the alcohol skills training rotation last year because we knew that it was happening. So for our chapters that are establishing in the fall, so SIUE, ISU, now LIU Post, those will all they will be worked into the rotation for ASTP starting next year. Binghamton, they just established last week, and so we don't have enough time this semester to work them into the rotation, so we'll work them into the rotation next semester as well, so starting in the fall. The hope is if we know in enough time, we can pre-plan them into the rotation. If we don't know in enough time, if there's enough time still to add them into the rotation, we'll add them in late. If we find out about something in the fall and it's a spring colonization, there's enough time in their new member experience to add one of these programs, we will. It just truly depends on a case-by-case basis. So worst case scenario, they receive something the second semester they're established and not the first. Does that answer that question, Karen?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Oh, and I should have also said sometimes campuses, when we are doing extension presentations, ask if we're willing to deliver a program like this to their entire community. And if we say yes to that, which we 9 times out of 10 do, and they also want that to happen once push comes to shove and we do actually establish there, we will work with them in order to make that happen. But it may just mean that I'm sending in 5, 6, 7 trainers to do it. One other piece that I wanted to talk about with the rotation logistics that I didn't, but as I said that, it jogged my memory. We do not present to groups larger than about 125. So for our chapters that are ginormous, we typically will send 2 facilitators and they do 2 programs at the same time. So facilitator A will do it in room 1 and facilitator B will do it in room 2. And then they'll take a break and then they repeat it again. So for our Alabamas, our Arkansas, chapters that are 400 and 500 people deep, we want to make sure that we have that one-on-one, not really, but at least 1 on 100 connection, rather than just you in a sea of people. If we have a group that's about 250 to 300 people, I still only send 1 trainer, but that trainer does the program twice. So she or he might do the program at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and then again at 6 o'clock. If you are wild and crazy like me, you do it back to back, which I would never in my life suggest, which I have learned, but that's also been done as well. So we do whatever the chapter really wants. If they would prefer to do one on a Saturday afternoon and then a Sunday morning, we'll make that happen as well. We also do this because attendance is a requirement with these programs. So they are expected to have 75% of their members in attendance when we deliver this program. And if they do not have 75% of their members in attendance, they are assessed, the chapter is assessed part of the facilitator cost on a sliding scale. So as long as I believe it's 60 to 75%, they would pay a quarter of the cost of the actual facilitator to get there. 50 to 60 is half, and anything below 50, they pay the full cost of the full actual cost of a facilitator going. Okay, so I'm going to move forward with this. ASTP is a 7-component program. Like I said, it's about 2 hours. If you are really speedy, you can get through it in about an hour and 40 minutes. If you are a big time talker, it takes about 2 hours and 10 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes. It really just depends upon the stories that you infiltrate. The thing with this program is we tell our facilitators to be vulnerable and to remember the time where they maybe were the most drunk, or where they maybe didn't make the smartest of all decisions when it came to alcohol and or their consumption. Because as you can open up to the crowd, it really helps our members realize that, oh, she or he has been in my shoes before. And that's what we want to do. We want to create that atmosphere of trust. We also, because we're creating that atmosphere of trust, that's why we are asking EME trainers to sign the non-disclosure comment or non-disclosure document that we sent to all of you as well. We want our members to feel as though they are in a safe, but I always say yet accountable space, so that we can have that conversation and what is said in that room can stay in that room, presuming that they are not harming themselves or others. The other piece to ASTP, so it's 7 components long. I'm going to walk through each of the components quickly, like Reader's Digest version quickly, once I finish this slide. And then I'm happy to work with any of you who may be interested in diving more into the curriculum a little bit later. The biggest piece to this program is that reducing harm means we're doing our job. So somebody may tell us during this program that they drink 2 bottles of wine a night. And I'm sure all of you have your jaws hit the ground just like I did when I first heard that. But the point to that is we want to reaffirm to her that, yes, we recognize that you may not be happy with your consumption at this point. So what can we do to reduce your risk? And if she gets herself to drinking only 1 bottle of wine a night, yes, while that's way too much still for her to be drinking, we have done our job with this program, and she's done her job at reducing her risk and reducing her harm because she's eliminated 1 whole bottle of wine each night. Does that mean that she's still not at risk? Absolutely not. But we're trying to reframe it so that they can see, okay, if I smoked a pack of cigarettes and I'm trying to cut back and now I'm only smoking 6 cigarettes a day, yeah, do I have some of the same effects that cigarettes give me, regardless of whether I smoke 6 or 20? Yes. But I'm reducing my risk because now I'm only smoking 6. So the goal and what we say towards the end of the program is we want you to get to that point where 0.06 is our ideal BAC. And if you drink to 0.06, great. 0.02 is better. So we want to get you to a point where you are abstaining or to where you are still having fun, but you know where your limit is. But we recognize that we're not going to get there to everybody. So if we can get them to that 0.06 or that 0.08, we've done our job too. So that's a big piece of this. We also talk about the fact that while we recognize drinking is illegal, which is a disclaimer that we put into this, while we recognize that drinking is illegal, we also recognize that college students do it. And so we're going to have an open and honest conversation about it so that you don't feel like we are in an atmosphere where you have to hide your actual tendencies when it comes to alcohol. We also say that if they do choose to make the choice to drink, that we will talk about doing so in a less dangerous, less risky way, but they could always still have the consequences of drinking underage because they are breaking the law. So again, we talk about that. We don't make it a huge emphasis. We do recognize that that is a piece of it, and then we move on from there. Another really cool piece to ASTP that I think is really well done, and many other alcohol programs don't do it, is when it discusses the biological differences between men and women. So it really talks about how testosterone and hormones, how they react with alcohol, and how men and women, alcohol affects us very differently. So if we took our standard average man and we take our standard average woman, and they're playing beer pong together, standard average man is about 160 pounds. Standard average woman is about 120 pounds per our documents. And they both drink 5 drinks over 3 hours. Man is going to have a BAC of 0.06. Female is going to have a BAC of 0.149. So she is rounding the corner to blacking out, whereas he is still legally allowed to drive a car. They drank the same amount over the same period of time. And the reason why it affects us differently is because of our biological differences. And so it really talks about how we can't drink as much as our male counterparts, and we have to be very careful. This program does talk a little bit about acquaintance rape and sexual assault that can happen when we are drinking, because at the end of the day, us drinking is impairing us, and it is not reducing our risk in order to be sexually assaulted. 75% of acquaintance rapes happen when alcohol is involved. And so again, back into the situation of my beer pong partner is standing right next to me, and we're at a 0.06 and a 0.149. We drank the same amount. Neither one of us can consent, but the likelihood being that something might happen is pretty high there. So we have conversations with our women about that as well. The last piece to ASTP that I think is really cool is it also talks about drugs and alcohol, and how they interact with one another. This is not talked about enough. I cannot tell you the amount of times I am consulted in a week when it comes to alcohol and drug consumption, and both with prescription and recreational drugs, because unfortunately we are back to the times where our members, and I shouldn't say our members, but college students are doing hard drugs. And it is not abnormal they don't blink an eye at weed anymore. Very common substance that women are taking, specifically college-age women. Cocaine, ecstasy has made its head back around into the college atmosphere, and so even has heroin. And so these are very common drugs that our women are talking about. You also have your drugs like Xanax and Adderall, and your prescription drugs that people are either actually prescribed or that they're giving to their friends to help them study, but then they've also started to learn, oh, well, what happens when I drink on it? Oh, I get this really funky feeling, and this is why. And so we talk a little bit about the drug and alcohol interaction and what happens when you are interacting with a stimulant versus what happens when you're interacting with a depressant, and why it's so hard on your system. So we talk a lot about that as well. So I'm quickly going to go through the 7 components. So the first component of the program is just helping them understand like why we're taking this approach. Why are we having the risk reduction conversation with them? And we frame that through, we want them to think with begin with the end in mind of, if I do something today, how could that affect my future moving forward? So if I end up getting a DUI because I decided to drink and drive, how is that going to affect my ability to get into law school? So something that I do in this mindset, in this frame of mind right now, how is that going to affect what I do in 5, 10, 15, 25 years? And so we talk through that with them. Then we explain why we're here, and we explain the philosophy of ASTP. So the 4 components to ASTP, the 4 biggest philosophy points, are that the best way to avoid the unwanted effects from alcohol is to not drink at all. So we talk about the abstinence piece of it, that if you want to abstain, good for you, because while you might be in the minority, you're making the best and most safe choice for you. Then we talk about if you're under the age of 21, it is illegal to drink. Third piece to that is if, however, you make the choice to drink, we can talk about doing so in a less dangerous, less risky way. And the last component, and this is the biggest component to this, is any steps towards reduced risk are steps in the right direction. So those are the four main pieces, philosophy pieces off of ASTP. We set a few ground rules with the chapter, and I have a few ground rules, and then we move forward. Component 2 talks about expectancies of alcohol and how it talks really about how ASTP has been created and how they did this big study about people who expected to get alcohol and actually got alcohol versus people who expected not to get alcohol and got alcohol, and people who expected to get alcohol and didn't get alcohol, and people who expected to not get alcohol and didn't get alcohol. So there were the four components, and we talk about the placebo effect because that's a piece of this as well. We walk through that entire study for them to show them how each of those different scenarios played out and what the expectancies were. So what did they expect to get from alcohol that they did or didn't get? The summary to this component is that the effects of the substances are due to the drug itself, the setting a person is in, and his or her mindset. It's not just the drug itself. So if I go into a night thinking I'm going to black out tonight, likelihood is I'm probably going to black out because I've put myself in the frame of mind that that's what I want to do. Just like, and the good thing with this study was it talked about people who they told were getting alcohol and they didn't get alcohol, but they acted worse than some of the people that actually did get the alcohol. Well, because they thought they were supposed to be rowdy. They thought they were supposed to yell. They thought they were supposed to be dancing and flirting and have increased touch and slurring their words, and all of these things happened. Well, the drug itself wasn't making them do that. Their mindset was. And so we talk about that as well. The expectancy effect is more powerful than the chemical or psychological effects of alcohol. Again, same thing there. And then the social and interpersonal things that happen with alcohol are a result of the expectancies. We tend to loosen up. We tend to be willing to talk to people more. We tend to have that brave conversation with the guy that you just met and you really like. We tend to do that when we have alcohol in our system because we think it makes us braver. In actuality, it's not. That chemical does nothing else for us. Third component is the assessment of use. So this is where we talk about a standard drink. And oftentimes when I go through and I say, you know, what is a standard drink and talk to me about some of these sizes, you will hear all over the board. It will be 12 ounces of beer versus 18 ounces of beer versus an 8-ounce can versus, they have no idea. We also talk about malt liquor versus wine coolers versus an ice malt liquor. And what those differences are. We talk about wine. That is a common misconception. Red and white have the same standard drink size, even though many people think that they don't. We talk about 80 proof hard alcohol versus 100 proof hard alcohol, what the differences are there and what those alcohols are. There are actually only two 100 proof alcohols. That's Captain Morgan and Everclear. Everything else runs between 73.5% to about 84.5% alcohol. And so that's why they fall into that 80 proof piece. That's always a common misconception. Our women never know that. Then we show them a grand old picture of the solo cup. And the solo cup, really, we explain to them that those lines on a solo cup mean something and where the right pour is at any point in time. The hope with that is that if they are drinking from a common source, which we explain to them is risky and dangerous and we don't want them to do it, if they are drinking from a common source, they know how to control what they're drinking based upon those lines on a cup. No, it might not come in that standard can or in that draft that you know is going to be 22 ounces, but you do know, okay, if I only pour to this line in this cup, I've still kept my standard drink size. So that's something that's important for them. We talk about their average number of drinks per week, the average number for a college student. Right now, that statistic is that 90% of college students drink on average, or I'm sorry, 90% of college students drink, and on average, they consume 10 drinks per week. This is highly underreported. It definitely is a lot higher than that. Oftentimes when you talk to our women, they will say they're lying. That's not accurate, especially if they know what standard drink size is. They may drink 10 things of jungle juice, but there's 6 standard drink sizes in each jungle juice. So there's no way they're drinking 10 drinks per week. Component 4 is alcohol in the body. So we talk about how alcohol gets into your system. We talk about the rate of absorption and how alcohol leaves the system, and then also how you sober up. Big thing with sobering up is you can only sober up over time. There is nothing else that will help us sober up. You can have your stomach pumped, but your alcohol at that point in time has already been absorbed in your bloodstream. So all you are doing is to pump your stomach so that you stop vomiting, and that hopefully we can help with some of the toxicity, but not much. Then we take them through a few scenarios of getting back to a 0.00 from the legal drinking limit, which is 0.08. It's going to take anybody 5 hours. If they drink to a 0.08, it will take them 5 hours to sober up. Then we talk about a 0.16 because that is what an average college student drinks to on any given drinking occasion. So 0.16, again, double the legal limit. So it's going to take them 10 hours to sober up. Good example of this that we've explained to them is Friday night, we go out, we have our date party, and we come back in at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we've stopped drinking at 2. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is when I'm sober again. But oh wait, that tailgate began at 8 a.m. And so you started drinking at 8 a.m. You weren't sober when you started drinking again. So we walk through that with them, and there are a lot of eyebrows raised and eye-opening comments that happen there. The last piece we talk about with this is getting from a 0.24 back to a 0.00. This is what a functional alcoholic drinks to. And the 0.24 really gets them to a point of really helping them understand how addiction sets in. Addiction takes about 3 hours to set in. And so a functional alcoholic, presuming they go to bed by about 11 p.m. every night, will have an addiction set in 15 hours would be how long it would take for them to sober up. So by 2 p.m., that functional alcoholic is going to start to have that addiction set in. So by 3, 4, now 5 p.m., we have to fix that addiction. So that's how a functional alcoholic can continue to work, and we explain that to them. I also explain to them that they are not functional alcoholics, that yes, they may be classified as a functional alcoholic based upon how many drinks that they have or the number of drinks that they have over a certain period of time, but that whether or not you keep those tendencies after college is the important piece. So that's something that we've talked about as well. Last piece of, I'm sorry, we're moving to component 5. Component 5, we talk about the blood alcohol level and what affects the BAC. And it also, we talk about what happens at each of those different phases. So at 0.02, we're buzzed. At 0.04, we're just relaxed. 0.06, we start to have some cognitive judgment impaired. We also teach them that after 0.06, there's this thing called a myopia, and it is nearsightedness. So we can only focus on this one little thing. We're not seeing everything else in the big picture around us. And so that is when myopia sets in. 0.08, nausea may occur, motor coordination is impaired. It's now illegal to drive. 0.110, we have clear deterioration in cognitive judgment and motor coordination. 0.15 to 0.25 is when a blackout is going to happen. 0.25 to 0.35 is when you're going to pass out. You also have loss of consciousness or risk of death. About 10% of our population has a deadly dose at 0.30. And then at 0.40 to 0.45, it's a lethal dose. So we talk to them again about the importance that if their friend is in trouble, we're going to call 911. Then we talk more about those sex differences, 5 drinks over 3 hours, standard man, standard woman. Why do we need to know this? And why is that an important component? We break some myths about tolerance, and that tolerance does not affect your BAC. But we do know that the expectancy effect is more than the drug itself. So tolerance is a result of the expectancy and not of the drug. Component 6 is the biphasic effects of alcohol. The biggest component to this is that we start to explain to them that when you are drinking, if you are drinking only to a 0.06, When you have a positive, you have a negative. When you have a positive, you have a negative. So there's no advantage or disadvantage to drinking. You get your high and you get your low. After you hit that 0.06, you have far more lows than you have highs. So the consequences continue to increase and the advantages continue to decrease. And so we teach them that that sweet spot is, or the point of diminishing return is 0.06. So that's where we want them to drink to if they're going to drink. Once we get to that 0.06, we shut it down and we're good to go. Then we go into the drug interaction piece, both with stimulants as well as depressants. We talk about cocaine, speed, ecstasy. Energy drinks is something we also talk about because the caffeine is important as well. And then we talk about what the takeaway is for them. The last piece we talk about is risk reduction and how can they truly reduce their risk? What are some moderate drinking guidelines and strategies? What are some ways that they can reduce their risk to themselves and the organization? This is where the alcohol and sex conversation comes in. 75% of acquaintance rapes involve alcohol. How can we reduce our risk in order for that to happen as well? We have a small conversation about being a bystander. Second piece to this, and I really never go through it, is drinking and driving. I tell them at this point in time, we have Uber, we have Lyft, we can walk. There is no reason why we should be drinking and driving. There's so many other things that we can do. So I just tell them, I'm not even going to talk about it because it's not going to be a problem. And then we finish it up, and the last two questions we ask them are, how can you reduce the risk to Kappa Kappa Gamma, and how will you choose to lead your chapter? So it's a good way for them to really wrap it up, see, okay, what can I do? How can I move forward with this? And how can I take this information to reduce my overall risk? So I know that was a lot, and I tried to do it really quickly. What questions do we have about ASTP? I figure it might be easier to do that now.
A few people asked if we could have like an overview of those components, something that we could send to them, but no specific questions now.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. We will probably not provide you the actual curriculum, but I can definitely give you all of the slides, which have a lot of information in them. If you have something specific, I'm happy to work with you one-on-one in order to go through those components. It's not a problem.
Okay. One other question, how to be trained for ASTP.
So ASTP, we have to, we do have an age requirement on that as well. So you cannot be more than 15 years removed from college because we need to have that trust relationship as well there. So that, as well as a trained facilitator, all of you, of course, meet that qualification. We will probably not do another training for ASTP, not this coming academic year. It will probably be the following. So we're probably about 3 semesters out from doing one, but we will host a training weekend, and I have to bring in a licensed ASTP facilitator to do the train the trainer type components. So if you are interested, shoot me an email afterwards, and I will put you onto our list of people that want to be trained when we do another training.
And that's all the questions right now.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to move forward in the interest of time. This one is not going to take as much time to go through, but the Behind Happy Faces program, this is a mental health program. It was developed by Ross Szabo, and he struggled with mental health himself. When he was in college, he was committed to, at that point in time, a mental health facility. He called it an insane asylum. It was not an insane asylum, but he was committed to a mental health facility. He had truly lost every ounce of well-being that he had. And it was not accepted within his family. Mental health was not something that was widely talked about. It's still not widely talked about, and we need to do a better job of destigmatizing the topic. And I think that's exactly what this program does. It teaches them truly what mental health is. It destigmatizes the topic, and it also teaches them how to notice and respond to somebody who may be struggling with their personal well-being. Yes, we talk a little bit about different disorders and that type of stuff. Excuse me, I'm sorry. but we don't go into that too far. It's more that conversation of care of how can I notice and respond? How can I recognize that other people in my chapter are potentially going through some of the very similar things that I am going through? And then we have that conversation with them as well. This program is very multifaceted, not just Behind Happy Faces, but all of our mental health initiatives. So we have a giant initiative with mental health at this point. We have the in-person facilitator-led curriculum that is Behind Happy Faces. And then we have, well, it is being developed. That's why there's 2 asterisks next to it. It is peer-led curriculum that is a deep down dive into stress and sleep. And that a chapter member, so the education chairman or say the VPS or whoever wants to have this conversation with the chapter, they could do a workshop on mental health if they're not in the rotation for Behind Happy Faces that year. The other big thing is, as we're talking about mental health, the biggest component to mental health is sleep. And so all of our women are deprived of sleep. Probably many of us on this webinar tonight are deprived of sleep. And so it's important to, it is important to see that as we are talking about mental health, we also recognize that that sleep component is an important component to it as well. Additionally, there are some online advisor and alumna courses. Those are already in the EME, so all of you can take those right now. There are 2 of them, and it's just for our advisors and our alumna who just want to learn a little bit more about the topic. I don't think any of us could ever be over-educated in this topic. And then we are working with Ross to also create online general courses when it comes to this topic. So if they wanted to learn more about sleep, great. We're going to make a small little online module for them. If they want to learn more about some of the like what makes our brain tick, that's going to be a module as well. So a lot of those pieces that really are the deeper dive that we don't get to have as intimate of a conversation with during Behind Happy Faces, we've put them into online modules. Those should be available in the coming weeks, but we wanted our members to have those regardless of whether they were getting mental health programming or not. Same thing with ASTP as it is with Behind Happy Faces. It's about a 2-hour workshop. Depending upon if you take the break and everything else, it might be 2 hours and 15 minutes, but should stick us right around the 2-hour time slot. And this is a very hands-on small group discussion type workshop. ASTP is more of that lecture that you give. Yes, they do a lot of pair and share, but that's about it. With Behind Happy Faces, they work in small groups of 10 to 12 for almost the entire curriculum. And so that gives them an opportunity to have that more intimate conversation, because this truly is a very intimate and personal topic. But it also gives the facilitator a little bit of a better way to read the room when it comes to the conversations that are being had. So I'm going to go through quickly this curriculum as well. It is about 10 exercises. And when I said it's more hands-on, it truly is more hands-on. Like they do 10 separate exercises throughout the curriculum. Yes, you are helping to get them to that point that you want them to be at, but it is not, oh, Hillary has her script and she has understood, memorized, and or knows what that script is. It's more, okay, they're going to do this activity. We're going to debrief it. We're going to explain why that's important for mental health. So the first piece to Behind Happy Faces, we just talk about what truly mental health is. We also make sure we offer a trigger warning with this program because this is definitely something that we do not want any women to feel blindsided by with the topic, and we want them to feel as though it's okay for them to get up and leave if necessary. We open it with 25% of college students experience a mental health disorder each year. Suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst college students. This has increased. I think it was like 10 years ago. It wasn't even in the top 10. And now here we are. Now suicide is the second leading cause. 66% of college students don't seek help for their mental health. So 1 in 4, in this situation, we could say 1 in 4 of our members is experiencing mental health. And of those 1 of 4, only 1 of 3 of them end up actually getting help. So 1 of 12 members that might be experiencing mental health is potentially seeking help for that. So very much so a topic that we need to destigmatize. Outside of mental health disorders, students are dealing with lack of sleep, stress, substance abuse, body image issues, and many other challenges. Something else that we like to set up with this program is explaining that mental health is not a competition. An unhealthy habit is very common to students, but it's also very common that you will hear Sally Sue say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I only slept 4.5 hours last night because I was cramming for my OChem final." And then we hear Jane come in and say, "Well, at least you got 4.5 hours. I only got 2 hours of sleep." Or I pulled an all-nighter. This is something that we are hearing all the time. I hear it with us too. "Oh, you had to work until what time?" "Oh yeah, I worked 15 minutes later than you." It's promoting an unhealthy habit, and it's also promoting unhealthy competition when it comes to mental health. We talk about some of those negative implications of that, and then we help them understand the true definition of what mental health is. So that's what the first exercise is. They really think of a list of words, ideas, people, songs, movies, whatever it might be that comes to mind to them when they think or when they hear the words mental health. So they create that, and then they also create a list of what they think that comes to mind when they describe physical health. And so we talk about mental health and physical health and how they interact together and how they are equally as important as one another separately. We also talk about some of the negative and positive connotations that we talked about when it came to mental health. So we're hearing the Lindsay Lohans and the Robin Williams and the, I mean, just anything that can come up with them. So oftentimes, though, we're hearing a lot more negative connotations than positive connotations when it comes to mental health. So we talk a little bit about that. And then the second exercise we discuss is learning more about the mental health challenges that we are all trying to address, and recognizing that people are going through the same difficulty that we at one point in time have already experienced. So what we ask them to do is we ask them to write on a note card one thing that nobody knows about them. And it helps them provide a more meaningful experience for them, that when they share what this one thing is, like you shuffle it and then they hand it back out and then somebody reads your card, you don't tell anybody what it was. But the point is that when you're reading some of these cards, they really will go deep on this. So some of the cards that I've read have said, "I tried to kill myself when I was in high school." Other cards said, "I don't tell everybody, but I'm a twin. She goes to a different school." So they can take it to a very extreme or to a very surface level conversation. But our hope on that is to help them understand that each experience with mental health is different, but that they're not alone. So while they may be unique in the challenges that they are facing, they're not alone in the fact that they are facing challenges. We're also trying to build that foundation for how to address mental health and how it requires us to communicate open and honestly. So if we're not willing to say that to our friends, then how can we continue to move forward? Exercise 3 talks about the mental health spectrum, and no, it doesn't. I'm sorry. It talks about different pieces to mental health. So there are 5 different categories: everyday challenges, environmental factors, significant events, mental health disorders, and developmental disabilities. And they are given a list of 24 different cards, and they're supposed to categorize those cards. What we teach them through this is that the only 2 categories that have correct answers are the actual mental health disorders and developmental disabilities sections. Significant events, while we have a suggestion for what might go in there, somebody may say death is a significant event. And somebody may say that unhealthy stress is a significant event, but we put it as everyday challenges. What we are trying to explain to them is that there's a lot of gray area and that it can fit in multiple different categories on this spectrum as well. And that for somebody, like bullying may be an everyday challenge, but it also could be an environmental factor. And we want them to see that not every single thing has a place. Just like with mental health, things can be in different situations at different times, and that's okay. Exercise 4, we address different challenges in their lives, and this is where the mental health spectrum comes into play. We talk about, it goes anywhere from able to balance to not able to balance. We allow them to place themselves on that spectrum. We also ask the question, at any point in time, was anybody not able to balance or need constant care to balance? And it helps them realize that they're not alone in that. But we can change on that spectrum at any given time. I could be able to balance today, and tomorrow I'm not able to balance at all. And so it's okay to say, okay, where are you on the spectrum? And that's what we want our women to start to get to have that conversation of knowing that it is okay to ask somebody if you don't know how to ask them anything other than, where are you at on the spectrum? If we're talking about the mental health spectrum, where are you at? Where do you feel as though you are right now? Because that can help them gauge how they will continue to move forward. At that point, we would give them a break if they wanted one. So far, I've not had any group that has wanted a break. They wanted to just move forward. Then exercise 5 is all about coping and ineffective versus effective coping mechanisms and how we use them, why they're important, all of that type of stuff. Exercise 6 helps them just have an easier time talking about mental health. So turning to a partner and talking about a time where they had to intervene in a mental health situation. Exercise 7 is how to approach a person who is actually experiencing a mental health challenge. So we notice that a friend has behavior changes. How do we help them? Do we notice what are a few steps that we can take if our friend refuses to get help? What are ways that you can take care of yourself when your friend is in this situation? Because you are also important as well. This kind of wraps up by having the motivational interviewing conversation of, we're going to ask open-ended questions so that we get that person talking a little bit more. Exercise 8, again, we go back into the 66% of college students experience a mental health disorder. 67% of college students first disclose suicidal thoughts or mental health challenges to a friend. And so when you're on that front line of the mental health challenge, how do we work through that? And so this is where they get a few case studies. Two of them are suicidal, one is not. And how do we know where those warning signs are? And how can we have a conversation and a dialogue about those warning signs with that person? So they work through that. And then after that, we take them into one more module about when someone is suicidal, how do we have that conversation? What do we know what to say when? What are our resources available to that person so that we can get them to their next steps? And then the last thing we do is a reaffirmation ending exercise where they are given 3x5 note cards, and we ask them to write 2 commitments on the note card to improve their own mental well-being. We ask them to take that with them, and we want them to look at it frequently. When they feel as though they have succeeded at the challenge to improve their mental health with those 2 components, we ask them to up it again in a couple weeks. Okay, look at it again. Do you feel that you could even improve it better, and in what ways? So it allows them to really put some self-onus on, how can I personally improve my mental health? The last piece that we do is distribute another 3x5 note card and ask them how they can improve their chapter environments with regards to mental health. So what can they do to make their chapter a more healthy place for them, so that they feel as though they're accepted if they have a mental health challenge, or how can they have a safe space to go express that they have a mental health challenge? We weave in the conversation of VPS and how standards is not always a scary place. And while it may seem a scary place, that standards is truly our place that we can have a conversation. And so if that conversation may be, I'm struggling right now and I can't come to every chapter event. Is there any way that I can work with you to get a special status so that for the next couple weeks, I can focus on me and making sure that my mental health is at its prime, and allowing us to get to that point where we can have that conversation. So again, like I said, with mental health, the point to this is let's teach them how to notice and respond. Let's teach them what mental health is, and let's teach them how to respond and how to destigmatize the topic. Mental health is not the same thing as a diagnosed disorder. Mental health is just as important as our physical health. And that's the communication we want to deliver to them, is that we have to make sure that we're taking care of our brain just as much as we're taking care of the rest of our body. If we're going to exercise 2 hours a day to make sure that we're in top physical condition, we need to make sure we're exercising our mind in the same way so that it has and lives a healthy lifestyle as well. So I know that was kind of the quick and dirty of Behind Happy Faces. I feel like I have talked for quite some time, even though I feel like I've sort of flown through it. But we are at almost 10 o'clock. So I want to open it up for any questions that you might have. Was there anything that I didn't answer or anything that I could have clarified in a better manner for you so that you have the most information you need?
We don't have any new questions coming.
Okay.
I think a few people would like, we'll put that together, an overview of the components and maybe something that talks about what the different activities are, just so the trainers have something to refer to.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hillary, for going through all of that. Oh, here's a good one. Will Behind Happy Faces have an alumni component? Training for advisors, curriculum for alumni themselves?
Yeah. Yes, there are the advisor courses. There's the online modules at this point. Right now, because Behind Happy Faces is in its pilot year, we're only offering it to chapters. But I do believe that we have thrown around the idea that if we could get an alumni association group that is big enough, or a couple groups that would be able to make some of these smaller groups. I really don't think you want to do the curriculum with like too many, less than about 20 people. But if we could get that together, that we would be willing to offer it to an association.
And the mental health assessment online would be available to alumni
Yes.
as well as chapter members.
Yeah, I completely forgot to include that in the mental health initiatives. And Karen, good call on that. There is on our website a mental health assessment tool that you can take. It's in the footer. So you are welcome to go take that. It is open to the public. So you don't have to be a member in order to take it. If you are talking with a friend or even your partner, whoever it might be that is interested in also learning a little bit more about that, that's a way for you to self-evaluate where your mental well-being may be at. And you can take it as many times as you want. So you could take it today and you could take it next week. Your results may differ, your results may stay the same, but it allows you some tips and tricks for how to better improve your mental health as well. So that is definitely a great resource. Thanks, Karen. I completely forgot about that.
So it looks like, okay, one more thing. So when will certification training be available for the other two? And I wonder if not the ASTP, but the mental, the diversity and sexual assault programming.
So the sexual assault program, like I said, we're going to launch it next academic year. We are still finalizing our training dates for that. Our hope is to have a training sometime this fall, and then everybody will participate in spring visits for the pilot year next year. I am presuming we will do something very similar to what we have done with ASTP and Behind Happy Faces, and we'll have a few trainings over the course of like the first 2 years. So if you're not interested in doing it now and you want to do it in the future, that's totally fine. So I will follow up with you because that date has not been solidified, but sexual assault should hopefully be sometime in the fall. I would also like to do another Behind Happy Faces training sometime next academic year, but I'm not sure if that will be in the fall or the spring yet. And then with diversity and inclusion, it will be the following fall. So it will be fall of 19 is when we are talking about training them. And or if we have our stuff together, which I can't guarantee because we try and do the best we can, but sometimes all of this curriculum doesn't fall in place where it needs to. And it also depends upon our funding for the year. If we have it together, we may do something in the summer of 19 going into the fall academic year.
Okay. So if that's all of our questions, I think we can wrap things up. I'm going to try to send you all a link to where that mental health screening is. Sometimes I don't find it so easily. But when I Googled Kappa Kappa Gamma and mental health screening, it pops right up. It's like the first hit there. So navigating the website, if that doesn't work for you, Hillary said it was in the footer, and I'm not finding that either. So we can work on better directions for getting to where that screening is, but I'll send a link so all of you tonight can go and check that out if you'd like to. No other questions? Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll get you some of those components and the exercise overview so you have those to look at. Thanks again. Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Good night.